Fire Mage makes huge explosions, we're throwing phoenixes at our enemies and crazy stuff like that. It's an amazing spec. I'm going to show you everything today in a really beginner-friendly format, but I'm also going to show you everything in a good amount of detail for those veterans watching too. We're going to jump straight into it then, starting with the stat priority. Of course, intellect is going to be our main stat. And we're just going to get a higher and higher eye level or item level of gear to get more intellect. We'll put the secondary stat priority here. However, I would say that you should always just prioritize getting a higher eye level of gear. And that's generally always going to be an upgrade and not to worry too much about the secondary stats. I do advise that you simulate your character if you know how and you care enough if you're looking at min-maxing at that higher level, however. If you don't know how to do that and you're a beginner, honestly, I wouldn't really worry about it. Just get a higher eye level of gear. Looking at the secondary stats, haste will actually increase your attack and spell casting speed. So like if we cast Fireball here, you can see it takes, X amount of seconds. The more haste we have, the quicker that will cast. We have versatility, which is going to simply increase your damage done, increase any healing done, and also reduce damage taken. It's a really good all-round stat. Then we have our mastery, which is called Ignite. This is different for every spec. And again, for us Fire Mages, it's Ignite. Your target burns for an additional amount of damage over 9 seconds of the damage dealt by our main fire spells. If we do some fire damage to them, you can see they have Ignite damage then applied to them, which is a dot or damage over time. The more mastery we have, the more fire damage Ignite will do. Fire Blast will actually cause our Ignites to also spread to nearby enemies. So if I use Fireball here and then I use Fire Blast, you can then see it's then spread to the other target dummy as well. I will be going through the entire rotation and the spells we have, etc. in full detail later in this video, by the way. So we've got Critical Strike, meaning you have a chance to do more damage. I'm going to take a quick look at our set bonus for this season as well. And again, if you don't know what any of these spells are, I will be covering them all fully shortly. So the 2 set bonus, Phoenix Flames damage is increased, and the amount is increased by 25% on its primary target. And our 4 set, after dealing damage, Phoenix Flames has a 10% chance to return to you, refunding a percentage of the cooldown on the Phoenix Flames and granting us some extra spell damage for 10 seconds. Phoenix Flames is this spell here where we're literally launching phoenixes at our target. More on how that works shortly, but that is what our set bonus revolves around this season. So now we're going to look at the utilities and some of the defensives, etc. that we have available to us as a mage. Now I am specifically saying mage here because these are not specialization utilities. These are actually available to you no matter which spec, Frostfire or Arcane, you are going with as a mage in TheWarWithin. So if you would like to try out some other classes, which I have done guides for, then feel free. You won't have to relearn all of this part of the video. So on the left here, we have things that are more affecting other people, so our enemies. And on the right-hand side, we've got some really useful abilities that are actually enhancing us and our allies. Now, there are a lot more utilities that I could go through, but I don't want to overwhelm you as this is a beginner video, and these are the core and important ones I think you should know about. When you're more comfortable with your specialization, I would recommend going through the spellbook here and just seeing what's what. The same would be with the mage talent tree on the left of your talents. So then, starting off, we have Polymorph. This is going to transform your enemy into a sheep, incapacitating them for an entire minute, and they cannot take any actions. They will regenerate any health that they have, so if you've got them down to 10% health, it's probably not the best time to polymorph them, but it will take them out of the action for a while so that you can focus on any, friends that they may have lying around. We also have Frost Nova here, which when I use, you can see has encased my enemies in ice, freezing them in place for 6 seconds, but damage may interrupt that freeze effect. We also have Slow, which you can see I've put on this enemy here, reduces the target's movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. We've also got Ring of Frost, which is placeable, so I can place it here, as you can see. Summoning a Ring of Frost for 10 seconds at that location. Enemies entering it are incapacitated for 10 seconds. When the incapacitate expires, they're then slowed by 65% for 4 seconds. So it completely stops them in their tracks, and then it slows them a bit after. And lastly, we have Counter Spell. This simply will kick, otherwise known as interrupt, the enemy's spell casting. So if they're casting a spell, you can interrupt that. And that is really, really important if you're doing PvP or things like Mythic Plus. Not as important in raiding. Still might be if there's certain ads, etc. in the fights, but generally it's more used in kind of Mythic Plus, leveling, questing, and PvP. So going on to the other side then, we've got Ice Block, where you actually incapacitate yourself into a block of ice, but prevents all damage being done onto you. Now, you cannot actually use this again for 30 seconds. You'll have a debuff, as you can see up here, Hypothermia. We have Mass Barrier, casting Prismatic Barrier on yourself and allies for how long for? Quite a long time, a whole minute. As you can see up here, Prismatic Barrier absorbs damage, magic damage taken reduced by 25%, duration of all harmful magic effects on you are reduced, and avoidance is increased by 5%. So avoidance here is another stat that we didn't go through in the stat priorities because we only have it sometimes. Reduces damage taken from area of effect attacks, or AoE, by 5%. We then have Greater Invisibility, making you invisible and untargetable for 20 seconds, removing all threat, and any action will cancel the effect. You take 60% reduced damage while invisible. We then have two abilities which we can actually massively impact our allies. Arcane Intellect, one of my favourites. Up here we can see Intellect is increased by 5%. This is the primary stat that we use as mages. And when you use this, it will actually go on you, any party members, and any raid members that you are in a group with. And you can target people in the wild and also give it to them as well. Lastly, we have Time Warp. This is otherwise known as Bloodlust or Heroism, increasing the haste of all party and raid members by 30% for 40 seconds, so you're going to cast your spells a lot quicker. And this is the de facto biggest cooldown in the game. Generally, your raid leader or group leader will call out when to use this. And you can see here, you now have temporal displacement. You cannot benefit from Time Warp or other similar effects for 10 minutes. And this is going to be the same if a shaman uses Bloodlust, if an evoker uses, is it Fury of the Aspects? Can't remember what it's called. If anyone uses a similar effect, you will all have that 10-minute cooldown. So whether a mage uses it or a shaman uses it in your group, you all are affected by the cooldown. What I'm trying to say is, if you've used it, a shaman cannot then use Bloodlust and use their one. It literally affects the whole group. Now, as I said, there are more in your spell book that you should probably look through. But again, don't overwhelm yourself. First, let's learn how we're going to play the spec. These are the general and most important ones that you are going to be using in TheWarWithin. Now let's actually look through the full rotation and the utilities, etc. we'll be using in a PvP environment, like the arena. So the first thing you need to know is about Hot Streak, okay? Getting 2 direct damage critical strikes makes your next Pyroblast instant. So let's say we use Fire Blast, which always deals a crit, by the way. You're going to see we get this buff here, heating up. So that's 1 out of 2 critical strikes. When we get our second one, we get an instant Pyroblast. Now, on our Pyroblast, if it's not instant, you'll see it's actually very, very slow to cast. And this is kind of our general rotation, but also our burst rotation. And it's going to really focus on getting those instant Pyroblasts. So we're going to go in with 2 Fire Blasts. They're always instant. And then use a Frostfire Bolt from our hero talents. Then we're going to enter our Combustion, which is our massive cooldown, engulfing you in flames, increasing all spells crit chance by 100%. And when you activate it, you gain crit damage, and up to 4 nearby allies also gain crit damage. We're then going to go in with a Meteor on them, basically just doing a load of Meteor damage. At that point, because we've used these 2, we should have an instant Pyroblast. Then we're going to use, again, our Pyroblasts, going in, Fire Blast. So it's basically Pyroblast, use your fire charges of Fire Blast, get instant Pyroblast, use your Fire Blasts, use instant Pyroblast, and they will be, because of Combustion, you'll be able to get loads of instant ones. And then once you run out of Fire Blast, basically just move on to Phoenix Flames instead. These also always do a critical strike. So we're basically just using Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames to get an instant Pyroblast, and then immediately after. And basically just going around like this. just using instant Pyroblasts. It is the simplest rotation I've ever seen in PvP, but it is amazing. It's massive burst damage with so much simplicity. It is just absolutely incredible. I love it. And that is pretty much the main rotation we're going to follow, using Frostfire Bolt as a filler. You can use Scorch here when on the move. When you get a proc, it'll also be instant. Scorch is guaranteed a critical strike and deals much more damage, and deals increased movement speed when cast on a target below 30% health as well. So when they're low health, it's even better. You can also use Flame Strike instead of Pyroblast if you've got multiple enemies all stacked up, like this here. That's kind of the AoE version, but that's really it there. Don't forget to put on your Arcane Intellect, and you can use your Time Warp as well when you're bursting. We've also got Blazing Barrier here, shielding you for a massive amount of damage. Blast Wave, reducing movement speed and blasting out fire damage. Counter Spell is your Interrupt. Polymorph, you probably already know, it's going to incapacitate them into a sheep for a minute. Mirror Image can, in PvP, disorient your allies if they're dumb enough to not realise which ones are the mirror image or not. But apart from that, it's going to attack them, but also reduce your damage taken by 20%. Mass Barrier will add the Blazing Barrier you have here, but to you and your allies. Ice Block makes you invulnerable. You could use this when they're doing their burst on you, etc. However, you cannot attack. Greater Invisibility makes you invisible and untargetable for a few seconds. Frost Nova can stop them in their tracks, as you can see. So can Slow. And then we can use Shimmer to get out of there and teleport away. We do have 2 charges of Shimmer. And lastly, Ring of Frost is another way to slow them down as well in a targetable location. And really, that is it for the main rotation and spells we'll use in Fire. It actually feels like a bit too simple, but that really is as much as there is to it. Because of how easily we can just get our Pyroblast instants out in PvP, it really doesn't take much more than that to do huge burst damage. We can also use Ring of Fire as one that I love. That'll summon, just like Ring of Frost, a Ring of Fire. When they enter it, they're going to lose about 20% of their health over a few seconds. I mean, if they come up and try and melee you and burst you, you could use this at your advantage. Glass Cannon is another fantastic one. Increases damage of Fireball, Scorch, and Ignite, but decreases your maximum health by 15%. Again, because we're so bursty, this is one you could take if you want to get even more burst damage out at the offset of survivability. And another one I like is Master Shepherd. While an enemy player is polymorphed, you are actually going to gain 25% increased movement speed and 12% versatility, increasing the survivability and also damage as well. And usually polymorph will heal the enemy, so it incapacitates them, but will also heal them, so they're kind of just out of the way. Now with this talent, it won't even heal them, so it's even better than it was before. So for this build, we are going with Frostfire. It does what it says on the tin. It's going to basically close the gap between Frost and Fire. So let's have a look. We're starting off with Frostfire Mastery. Your damaging fire spells generate a stack of Fire Mastery, and Frost obviously do the same. Fire Mastery increases your haste by 1%, and Frost Mastery increases your mastery by 1%, and it can stack up to 6 times. Going down the left side then, first of all, we've got a utility choice. I like to go with Imbued Warding. Blazing Barrier also casts an Ice Barrier on you. You can go for Meltdown, where you can move a little bit in your Ice Block, but I don't really like it. You may, however. Isothermic Core. Comet Storm now calls down a Meteor onto your target. Meteor now also calls down a Comet Storm. So basically, symbiotic there. Excess Frost, reaching Maximumo, stacks of Frost Mastery, causes your next Phoenix Flames to also cast Ice Nova at 200% effectiveness. And when you consume excess Frost, the cooldown on Meteor is reduced. I really like how the Frost and the Fire, like you can still do your Fire rotation, but it's like, it's then doing Frost as well. It's really cool. We do get the new ability Frostfire Bolt, of course, launching a bolt of Frostfire at the enemy, causing Frostfire damage, slowing movement speed by 50%, and causing an additional amount of Frostfire damage over 8 seconds. Frostfire Bolt does generate both masteries, so Fire and Frost Mastery. Another choice node, Severe Temperances, casting damaging Frost or Fire spells at a high chance to increase the damage of your next Frostfire Bolt, and Thermal Conditioning, where its cast time is reduced. I like Severe Temperances. Then we have Frostfire Empowerment. Both your Frost and Fire spells have a chance to activate Frostfire Empowerment, causing your next Frostfire Bolt to be instant cast, deal more damage, explode for some of its damage to nearby enemies as well, and grant you the maximum benefit of your Frostfire Mastery and refresh its duration, which is huge. Next up, the cooldown of Frost spells with a base cooldown shorter than 4 minutes is reduced. I like that. That's why I've taken it. Frostfire Infusion. Your Frost and Fire spells have a chance to trigger an additional bolt of Frostfire, dealing some damage. And then we've got Excess Fire, reaching maximum stacks of your mastery, Fire Mastery specifically, causes your next Fire Blast to apply Living Bomb. When the Living Bomb explodes, reduce the cooldown of Phoenix Flames. So it's all just reducing each other. There's not a lot really happening here, apart from Frostfire Bolt, which I've already spoken about in the rotation, of course. And then we have Flash Freeze Burn. Frostfire Empowerment grants you maximum benefit of your Frostfire Mastery and refreshes its duration, and activating Combustion, or if you're in Frost, Icy Veins, grants you Frostfire Empowerment. So again, I'm kind of just showing you why we're doing what we're doing. This is already all worked into the rotation that I've shown you. Obviously, the hero talents are new, so I just kind of wanted to go into these in a bit more detail than I usually would with the talents. But that is Frostfire Mage, and that is obviously the build we are taking in this Fire Mage rotation. Looking finally at the consumables and enchants, etc. we're going to use as a mage in TheWarWithin, a few things have changed. So, Nerubian Gem Weavers, these are the sockets you can add to your gear, which are coming from the weekly vault, and we can add these to our head, wrist, and waist. You can also now add 2 sockets to your neck and both rings with the magnificent jeweler's settings in TheWarWithin. So 2 on the neck, 2 on each ring. Now let's look at the enchants. Winged Grace gives avoidance and reduces fall damage. Crystalline Radiance gives primary stats, so intellect. Chant of Armored Avoidance is avoidance. Sunset Spellthread gives intellect and stamina. Defender's March increases your stamina. You can go for Scout's March, I think it's called, which increases your speed instead, but a bit squishy. I like to go for Defender's March. Haste on both enchants for the rings, unless you're using a different secondary stat, depending on maybe your, simming your character, etc. And then the Authority of Radiant Power, where basically you have a chance when doing damage to cause a massive amount of damage on your target and also increase your primary stat. Then looking at the consumables, you can go for the Flask of Alchemical Chaos. I prefer the Tempered Versatility one because it's giving versatility, meaning we're adding damage but also reducing damage, and it's a pretty nice, kind of overall flask, same as what we were using in the previous expansion. And then we can go for the Feast of Midnight Masquerade for intellect. Tempered Potion. What this does is it will actually give you all the other secondary stats that you don't get from your flask, which I think is pretty neat. Healing Potion is called an Algari Healing Potion in this expansion, which is TheWarWithin. Algari Mana Oil, which is nice. They are adding back Mana Oil, increases critical strike and haste. Crystallized Augment Rune to add intellect if you are using Augment Runes. And then the Blasphemite is really interesting. You can see here we're using different gems. So the Blasphemite increases primary stat, and it also increases your critical effect of your crits by 0.15% per different color gem used. Meaning if we use an Onyx, Sapphire, Emerald, and Ruby, then we're going to get 0.60% increased effect. Whereas if we only used all of one color, we'd only get 15%. So you want to kind of use these 4 different colors to get more effect from your Blasphemite. After that, I would say to use the colored gems. If you've got more than four gem slots, I would say to simulate your character, maybe look at your stat priority and see kind of what you need the most at that point for your character, because it could be different depending on the gear levels you have at that point. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in TheWarWithin Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in TheWarWithin as well. I am doing all classes and specs for TheWarWithin, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for TheWarWithin Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVY, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.